The drive from Austin took 7 hours. My grandfather, Harold Phillips, had owned that ranch for 50 years, 900 acres of Texas hill country, stretching down to a private lake that felt like the edge of the world when I was a kid. He passed 3 weeks ago and left everything to me. What no one told me was that someone had already built a mansion on my land and claimed it as her own. That arrogance would become her biggest mistake. If you're new here, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened next proved that justice doesn't need violence, only patience and evidence. I turned off the county road onto what should have been my grandfather's private drive, and that's when I saw the first sign that something was very wrong. A wrought iron gate stood across the gravel path, brand new, freshly painted black, with a security camera mounted on top. The sign wired to the bars read, "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted," in bold red letters. I sat there in my truck for a full minute, engine idling, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My grandfather never had a gate. He used to say that fences were for people who had something to hide, and Harold Phillips had nothing to hide from anyone. I pulled out my phone and checked the GPS coordinates against the deed the lawyer had given me. This was the right place, and someone had locked me out of it. I parked the truck on the shoulder and walked along the fence line, looking for another way in. The old path through the cedar trees was still there, overgrown but passable, and I followed it for about a quarter mile until the trees opened up and I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. There, sitting on a gentle slope overlooking the lake, the same lake where my grandfather taught me to fish when I was 8 years old, was a mansion. 3 stories of stone and glass, with a 4-car garage, a swimming pool that caught the afternoon sun, and a private dock extending into the water. The construction looked about 3 years old, which meant someone had built an 8,000 square foot estate here while my grandfather was still alive. I could smell fresh mulch from the landscaping and hear the hum of a pool filter running somewhere behind the house. None of this had been here the last time I visited. A woman emerged from the front door. She was in her mid-50s, wearing white linen pants and a silk blouse. Her blonde hair pulled back in a way that suggested she had just come from a country club lunch. She walked toward me with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you own everything you can see. And when she spoke, her voice carried the sharp edge of someone who was not used to being questioned. "This is private property," she said, stopping about 20 feet away. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave before I call the sheriff." I told her my name was Jose Phillips, that Harold Phillips was my grandfather, and that according to the deed I was holding, she was standing where she did not belong. She laughed, actually laughed, like I had told her a joke she had heard 100 times before. "Harold Phillips sold this parcel to me 5 years ago," she said. "I have the paperwork to prove it. I'm Marie Hargrove, and everyone in this county knows who I am. My ex-husband was the county commissioner for 12 years. So, I suggest you take your little piece of paper back to whatever city you came from and stop wasting my time." I asked her to show me the deed of sale. She refused. I asked her about the permits for the construction. She told me that it was none of my business. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, and within 15 minutes, a deputy sheriff arrived at the gate. He didn't ask me for my side of the story. He just told me that this was a civil matter, that I needed to leave, and that if I came back without a court order, I would be arrested for trespassing. Marie Hargrove stood behind him the whole time, arms crossed, smiling like she had already won. I drove back to town and checked into the only motel that would take me. That night, I sat on the bed and opened the box of documents my grandfather's lawyer had given me: deeds, surveys, tax records going back decades. Near the bottom, I found something that made my hands shake. It was a survey map from 1987, hand-annotated by my grandfather, showing the exact boundaries of his property. According to this map, the mansion Marie Hargrove had built was not on the edge of the land. It was 247 feet inside the property line. She hadn't just encroached. She had built her dream home on ground she had never owned. And then I found something else, a letter from my grandfather, dated 6 months before he died. 3 sentences, written in his shaky handwriting. "Keep the land. Don't trust them. They will come for it." I called my grandfather's estate lawyer first thing in the morning. He checked his records and called me back within the hour. His voice was careful, measured, like he was choosing every word. "There's no record of any sale," he said, "but I should tell you something. 3 years ago, Someone came to the county recorder's office and tried to amend the property records. They wanted to add a transfer document to the file. The clerk refused because the signatures didn't match the originals. She was pressured to approve it anyway. I asked him what happened to that clerk. He paused for a long moment before answering. She was forced into early retirement 2 months later. No one's heard from her since. And the next morning, I went to the county recorder's office to pull the original deed. The woman behind the counter typed my grandfather's name into her system, frowned, typed it again, and told me she couldn't locate the file. Older records get misfiled sometimes. Submit a formal request, and we'll search the archives, 4 to 6 weeks. Before I could respond, the door opened behind me. Marie Hargrove walked in with a man in a gray suit, and the clerk's entire demeanor changed suddenly, smiling, helpful, practically falling over herself. Marie didn't acknowledge me. She walked straight to the counter and requested certified copies of her property documents. The clerk produced them in under 5 minutes. No waiting period, no formal request, no 4 to 6 weeks. That single moment told me everything I needed to know about how this county operated. I drove to the sheriff's office and filed a complaint for trespassing and illegal construction. The deputy who took my statement was polite but immovable. Property disputes were civil matters, he explained. Without a court order establishing ownership, his hands were tied. He glanced at my deed, shrugged, and said Marie Hargrove had paperwork too. When I asked about verifying the construction permits, he scribbled down a number for code enforcement. I called from the parking lot, 6 to 8 weeks for an inspection. When I pressed for something sooner, the line went dead after 10 minutes on hold. 3 offices, 3 walls. Each one was built from the same bricks. I spent the afternoon calling every attorney within 50 miles. The first claimed a conflict of interest. The second was too busy. The third listened carefully, asked me to hold, and returned to say this wasn't the type of case his firm handled. By the 5th rejection, the pattern was undeniable hesitation the moment I mentioned the Hargrove name, followed by a polite excuse and a quick goodbye. Marie's ex-husband had been the county commissioner for 12 years. 12 years of favors, appointments, and relationships woven into every corner of local government. I wasn't fighting one woman. I was fighting a system designed to protect people like her from people like me. That evening, someone slid an envelope under my motel room door. Inside was a letter on legal letterhead, Derek Hargrove, attorney at law demanding I cease all harassment and defamatory conduct against Marie Hargrove or face immediate legal action. The letter accused me of spreading false statements about her property ownership and threatened a lawsuit seeking damages in excess of $500,000. Every paragraph was written to sound authoritative. Every sentence crafted to make me feel like I was already losing a case that hadn't been filed. I looked up Derek Hargrove online. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a real estate agent, Marie's brother-in-law, working out of an office 2 towns over. The letterhead was fake. The threats were hollow, but the message was calculated. They wanted me scared, second-guessing myself, wondering if I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. What they didn't realize was that their desperation told me something valuable. I was closer to the truth than they wanted me to be. The next morning, a deputy knocked on my motel door. He said he was there for a welfare check. Someone had called in concerns about my erratic behavior. He asked if I was feeling all right, if I had any thoughts of harming myself or others, if I understood that making accusations against respected community members could have serious consequences. His tone was friendly, but his eyes never left mine. When he finally left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. They were trying to build a narrative, the unstable outsider, the troubled nephew making wild claims. If I reacted with anger, I would prove them right. The message was clear. Back off, or things would get worse. I went to a diner on the edge of town to figure out my next move. The waitress brought coffee and asked if I was the Phillips boy who had come back for Harold's land. She said my grandfather had been a regular here for decades, one of the good ones. I was about to ask for the check when an older woman at the counter turned and looked at me. Silver hair, reading glasses on a chain, sharp eyes that had seen too much. "You're Jose Phillips," she said. It wasn't a question. She walked over and slid into the booth across from me without waiting for an invitation. "My name is Margaret Pearson. I used to work at the county recorder's office. I know why you're here, and I know what they're trying to do." She glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. Your grandfather never sold that land, not 1 acre. 3 years ago, someone brought transfer documents to my office and demanded I file them. The signatures didn't match anything in Harold's records. When I refused to certify the amendment, I got a call from the commissioner's office telling me to make it happen anyway. I said no. Her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. 2 months later, my position was eliminated, budget cuts, they said, 40 years of service, and they pushed me out like I was nothing. I asked if she had any proof of what she'd seen. She reached into her purse and slid a small envelope across the table. The permit for that construction was approved in 72 hours. Normal processing takes 6 to 8 weeks. And the permit number, the prefix, doesn't match any other permit issued that year. Someone created it outside the system. She stood to leave, then paused and looked down at me with something between pity and hope. They think they've covered their tracks, Mr. Phillips, but they made mistakes, and I think you're the kind of person who knows how to find them. I checked out of the motel the next morning and drove back to Austin. For 3 days, I didn't make a single phone call, didn't file a single complaint, didn't give anyone in that county a reason to think about me. I went back to my job, sat in meetings, answered emails, and let Marie Hargrove believe she had won. But every night after work, I sat at my kitchen table with my grandfather's documents spread out in front of me and built a case. The envelope Margaret Pearson had given me contained photocopies of permit records enough to show me where to look. If they wanted to play a long game, I would play a longer one. The first thing I needed was an independent survey. Every surveyor in the county had refused my calls. So I searched neighboring counties and found Bradley Walker, a retired civil engineer who did private survey work 2 counties over. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. I've seen this kind of thing before, he said. County insiders are playing games with property lines. Give me the legal description, and I'll have boots on the ground within a week. I sent him everything: the 1987 survey from my grandfather's files, the GPS coordinates of the original boundary markers, and satellite imagery showing the mansion's location. While Bradley worked, I filed requests with every relevant authority. FOIA to the county for all permit applications related to the property over the past 10 years. Texas General Land Office for original land patents. Texas State Archives for backup copies of all property transfers filed during the year Marie claimed the sale occurred. Every request went by certified mail with delivery confirmation. If anyone tried to claim I hadn't followed procedure, the paper trail would prove otherwise. The survey results came back in 9 days. Bradley called on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear grim satisfaction in his voice. The mansion sits 247 feet inside your property line, he said. Not even close to the boundary she's claiming. I found 2 of the original markers discarded in a drainage ditch about 100 yards from the construction site. GPS coordinates match your grandfather's survey exactly. Whoever built that house knew they were on the wrong land. I asked him to prepare a certified report with full documentation photographs, GPS data, overlay comparisons, everything admissible in court. That report would become the foundation of everything that followed. While I waited, I started cross-referencing Margaret's information with public records. The permit number she had flagged was anomalous. Every other permit issued that year began with a 4-digit prefix indicating the fiscal quarter and department code. Marie's permit began with a different sequence, one that didn't appear anywhere else in the database. Someone had created it outside the normal system, bypassing standard review. The contractor listed on the application was Hargrove Development, LLC. A search of the Texas Secretary of State's business filings revealed the owner, Craig Hargrove, Marie's brother-in-law, the same man whose fake legal letterhead had been slipped under my motel door. The permit had been approved by Diane Mercer, a county planning officer who started her position in early 2019, the same year the permit was filed. Her previous employer, according to LinkedIn, was a Houston real estate firm called Hargrove Properties. I found one more detail that night, buried in the permit application, to verify property ownership. The form required the landowner's social security number. The number listed matched the format of my grandfather's. I had seen it in his tax documents. But the last 2 digits were wrong, not by much, just enough to suggest someone had guessed, or copied from a document where the final digits were smudged. A small mistake. The kind that only matters when someone is paying attention. Then I looked at the timeline. Marie claimed my grandfather sold her the land in 2019, but according to the medical records from his estate file, Harold Phillips had been hospitalized from January through November of that year. 11 months of treatment for congestive heart failure. I pulled out the hospital admission forms, the discharge summaries, the physical therapy reports. He couldn't walk to the bathroom without assistance. His hands trembled so badly that nurses had to help him sign consent forms for his own medical procedures. The idea that he had negotiated a land sale, met with attorneys, and signed transfer documents during that period was beyond implausible. It was physically impossible. Yet somehow, a deed existed with his signature dated March 15th, 2019, a day when hospital records showed he was sedated and recovering from a cardiac episode. Someone had forged it. And they hadn't bothered to check whether their story would hold up against basic medical documentation. 2 days later, I received the call I had been waiting for. The forensic document examiner I had hired to analyze Marie's deed had completed her analysis. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the weight of what she was about to say. "The signature on this deed is not authentic," she said. "It was traced from another document, probably something your grandfather signed years earlier. The pen pressure is wrong, the stroke patterns are inconsistent, and there are hesitation marks indicating careful copying rather than natural writing. I also found microscopic graphite residue beneath the ink. Someone penciled the signature first, then traced over it." She paused. "Mr. Phillips, this isn't just a bad forgery. This is deliberate fraud, and whoever did it left enough evidence that any competent prosecutor would have no trouble proving intent." I now had an airtight evidentiary foundation documents that would hold up in any courtroom, expert testimony that couldn't be disputed, and a timeline that made Marie's story impossible. Any reasonable judge would rule in my favor, but Marie Hargrove had never operated in the realm of reasonable. She operated through relationships, intimidation, and perception. Filing a lawsuit now would give her time to delay, discredit, and bury me in procedural motions while her friends in the county looked the other way. Evidence proves what happened. Power decides what matters. I needed to understand the full scope of her network before I made my move. I contacted a real estate litigation attorney in Houston named Nathan Cross. He had no ties to the county, no history with the Hargrove family, and a reputation for taking cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. When I laid out everything I had, he was silent for a long moment. "This is one of the most documented cases of property fraud I've ever seen," he finally said. "But Marie's name isn't on the forged deed. Her brother-in-law built the house, but he could claim he was following orders. The planning officer approved the permit, but she could say she was misled. If we go to court now, they'll sacrifice someone low on the ladder. And Marie walks away claiming she was a victim of bad advice. We need direct evidence of her involvement, something that proves she knew and directed it." Nathan suggested a two-pronged approach. First, file complaints with every relevant regulatory body, the Texas Real Estate Commission for Derek Hargrove's fake legal letterhead, the County Ethics Board for permit irregularities, and the State Bar for any attorneys involved in preparing the fraudulent deed. These complaints wouldn't produce immediate results, but they would create official paper trails that investigators could follow. More importantly, they would signal to anyone involved that the situation was no longer contained. People who had helped Marie because they thought that there would never be consequences might start reconsidering their loyalty. Fear of prosecution has a way of loosening tongues. Second, continue gathering evidence through public records requests, specifically any communications linking Marie directly to the fraud. Government emails were subject to FOIA. If she had corresponded with county officials about the property, those emails existed somewhere. We just had to find them. The FOIA responses started arriving 3 weeks later. Most of it was routine permit applications, inspection reports, zoning requests, but buried in the second batch was an email chain between Diane Mercer, the planning officer who had approved Marie's permit, and a personal email address. The chain had been included accidentally. Someone in the records office had failed to redact a CC field. The personal email belonged to Marie Hargrove. In one message, dated 2 weeks before the permit was officially filed, Marie had written, "Just push it through quickly. I'll handle Richard if there are any questions." Richard Dawson, the former county commissioner, her ex-husband, she wasn't just a beneficiary of the fraud. She had orchestrated it. I forwarded the email to Nathan immediately. "This is direct evidence of coordination," he said, "but we need a perfect chain of custody documentation. The email was released through official channels, which makes it a legitimate public record. When we present this in court, there can't be a single gap they can exploit. I'm having a paralegal certify the timeline of every document we've received when it arrived, how it was stored, who handled it. Defense attorneys look for procedural cracks. We're not giving them any." While Nathan built the legal framework, I kept digging. The county's online archives included records of public meetings going back 15 years. I spent 3 nights reading through every planning commission session from 2018 and 2019, searching for any mention of lakefront development or the Henderson property. In the minutes from a session in October 2018, 6 months before the fraudulent deed was dated, I found what I was looking for. A resident had asked about building restrictions near the Henderson property. The commissioner had responded that the Henderson land remained in private hands and was not available for development. My grandfather's land, described in the official public record as unavailable, and on the attendance list for that meeting, halfway down the second page, Marie Hargrove. She had been there. She had heard it herself. 8 months before the forged deed was supposedly signed, she had sat in that room and listened to someone explain that the property belonged to Harold Phillips and was not for sale. Then she had gone ahead and taken it anyway. I called Nathan and walked him through what I had found. The meeting minutes, the email chain, everything is layered on top of the forensic report and the survey. "We have enough," I said. "When do we file?" His response was immediate and sharp. "Not yet. Right now, Marie thinks you gave up. That confidence is our weapon. The moment we file, she'll know what we have and start undermining it, pressuring witnesses, destroying documents, shaping a public narrative. But there's a county commission meeting in 3 weeks. Land use review is on the agenda." He paused to let that sink in. "If she makes statements on public record that contradict our evidence, she can't walk them back. Public meetings are recorded. Transcripts become official documents. Let her commit to her lies in front of cameras and witnesses. Then we have her for fraud and perjury. Can you wait 3 weeks?" I thought about my grandfather's letter. Keep the land. Don't trust them. He had protected this property for 50 years, fought off pressure I was only now beginning to understand. He had known they would come for it eventually. He had prepared for this moment, leaving behind the documents and the warnings that had guided me this far. I thought about the nights he must have spent in that old farmhouse, watching the lake, wondering who would try to take it after he was gone. He had trusted me to finish what he started. 3 weeks were nothing compared to what he had endured. "I can wait," I said. Nathan's voice carried a note of approval. "Good. In the meantime, stay quiet. Don't contact anyone in the county. Don't respond to anything Marie or her people might send. Let them think this is over." He paused. "Because when we move once. And when we're done, there won't be anything left for her to hide behind." 2 weeks passed. I went back to work in Austin, kept my head down, and let Marie Hargrove believe she had won. Then she decided that winning wasn't enough. She needed to destroy me. It started with a post on a community page for lakefront property owners. A neighbor of my grandfather's sent me the screenshot on a Tuesday morning. Marie had written it herself, using a photo pulled from my professional profile online. The caption read, "Beware. This man has been harassing longtime residents of our community with false claims about property ownership. He is an outsider with no connection to our lake except greed. If you see him, do not engage. Report any contact to local authorities immediately." Within hours, the comments had multiplied people. I had never met calling me a scammer, a con artist, a predator. Someone claimed I had a history of filing frivolous lawsuits. Someone else said I had been seen casing properties around the lake. None of it was true. All of it spread. The real-world consequences followed quickly. When I drove back to the county that weekend, I stopped at a hardware store where my grandfather had bought supplies for 50 years. The owner saw me at the counter and turned away. I waited 10 minutes before a younger employee approached and whispered that I should probably shop somewhere else. "It's not personal," she said, "but Mrs. Hargrove knows everyone, and everyone knows what happens to people who cross her." That single moment told me everything about how deep her influence ran. I wasn't just fighting one woman's lies, I was fighting an entire community's fear. The harassment escalated from social to institutional. On Monday, I received a call from Child Protective Services in Austin. Someone had filed an anonymous report claiming I was neglecting children in my care. I don't have children. The caseworker recognized it as weaponized reporting. She had seen it before. It's harassment designed to create a paper trail against you, she said. I'll close the case, but document everything. 2 days later, someone spray-painted "Go Home" across my truck while it was parked at a motel outside the county. The security camera had been conveniently pointed elsewhere. I filed a police report anyway. Every incident on record was another brick in the wall we were building. I stayed calm through all of it, not because I wasn't angry, but because I understood what Marie wanted. She wanted me to react publicly, to give her ammunition to paint me as unstable. If I lost my temper, she won. If I stayed quiet and let her overextend, she would make a mistake. People who believe they're untouchable always do. The mistake came on a Saturday. Marie hosted a charity fundraiser at her mansion, the kind of event designed to remind everyone how generous and connected she was. Afterward, she posted a video tour on a community page, showing off the grand foyer, the custom kitchen, and the infinity pool overlooking the lake. She narrated in a voice dripping with pride, talking about how she and her ex-husband had dreamed of this place for years. I watched it 3 times before I saw what she had given me, at the 4-minute mark. Marie walked past a wall where several framed documents hung. One was the construction permit. The camera passed over it quickly, but not quickly enough. I paused and zoomed in. The permit number was visible, the anomalous one Margaret Pearson had flagged, with the wrong prefix. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. The permit description read, accessory structure, 400 square feet. 400 square feet. The mansion she was standing in was 8,000 square feet. She had framed a permit authorizing a structure 1/20th the size of what had actually been built, and she had broadcast it to everyone watching. I called Nathan immediately. "I'm looking at it now," he said. I could hear him typing, taking screenshots. "This is extraordinary. She didn't just post evidence of fraud, she posted it while bragging about the house. Any jury will see this as consciousness of guilt. She knew exactly what permit she had, and she displayed it like a trophy." He paused. "Check the comments." I scrolled down, halfway through. Someone had asked Marie when she first knew she wanted to build on the lake. Her response was casual, almost careless. "Oh, we've been planning this dream home for over 10 years. It just took a while to make it happen." 10 years. The forged deed was dated 6 years ago. She had just admitted in writing, in public, that she had been planning this house years before she supposedly purchased the land. Intent, premeditation, a confession disguised as a humble brag. "She handed us everything," Nathan said. "The permit fraud, the timeline contradiction." Her own words, on public record. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the edge beneath it. "The commission meeting is in 5 days. Land use review is on the agenda, and Marie has already requested time to speak, probably to reinforce her victim narrative. She's going to walk into that room believing she's untouchable. And we let her keep believing that," I said. "Exactly. We don't file anything. We don't contact anyone. We let her stand up in front of cameras and witnesses and commit to every lie she's told. Then we present the evidence, the survey, the forensic report, the medical records, the email chain, and now this video. Every word she says will be contradicted by documentation she can't dispute. And once it's on public record, she can't unsay it." He took a breath. 5 more days. "Jose, can you hold?" I thought about the spray paint on my truck, the whispers at the hardware store. The CPS report was designed to make me look like a danger to children I didn't have. Marie had spent 2 weeks trying to break me, to make me react, to give her something she could use. She had thrown everything she had at my reputation, my livelihood, my peace of mind, and all she had accomplished was proving how far she was willing to go to protect a lie. Every attack she launched was another piece of evidence showing consciousness of guilt. Every escalation revealed how much she had to lose. "I can hold," I said. 5 days is nothing." Nathan's response was quiet but certain. "Good, because when she walks into that commission meeting, she's going to think she's there to bury you. She won't realize until it's too late that she's been building her own coffin." 5 days before the county commission meeting, Nathan and I finalized our strategy. The litigation package was complete civil complaint, criminal referral to the district attorney, and regulatory complaints to 3 separate agencies. Every claim was supported by the documented chain of fraud we had spent weeks assembling. The only question remaining was how badly Marie would damage herself before we presented it. "The commission meeting is Tuesday evening," Nathan said. "Land use review starts at 7. Marie requested speaking time during public comment. She's planning to position herself as a victim of harassment. Let her talk. Let her say whatever she wants on the record. Once she's finished, you request time to respond. That's when we present." He slid a folder across the table. Summary packet for the commissioners, survey overlay, permit comparison, timeline chart, everything visual, everything undeniable. The full documentation gets filed with the court on Wednesday morning. The next 3 days moved slowly. I had reviewed the evidence so many times that I could recite every date, every discrepancy, every connection from memory. There was nothing left to prepare, nothing left to discover. The case was built. All that remained was the waiting and the growing certainty that once I walked into that room, nothing could be taken back. I went to work, sat through meetings, answered emails. My colleagues had no idea what was happening. To them, I was just another software engineer debugging code and reviewing pull requests. None of them knew that in less than a week, I would be standing in a county commission chamber, dismantling a fraud that had been years in the making. On Sunday, the Lake County Herald published a story about permit irregularities in the planning department. The article didn't mention Marie by name, but it referenced questions raised about expedited approvals for lakefront construction and noted that as multiple county employees have resigned under unclear circumstances in recent years. Someone had been talking. The story was no longer contained within Marie's carefully controlled narrative. It was becoming public before we had even presented our evidence. I read the article 3 times, looking for any indication of who the source might be. Margaret Pearson, perhaps, or one of the other employees who had been pushed out when they refused to play along. Whoever it was, they had cracked open a door that Marie had spent years keeping sealed. I watched the community page that afternoon. The response was divided. Some residents defended Marie, insisting she was being targeted by outsiders with agendas, but others began asking questions that hadn't been asked before. Why had the permit process been so fast? Who had approved it? Was it true that the planning officer had connections to the Hargrove family? One longtime resident wrote, "I've known Marie for years, but if everything was legitimate, why won't she just show the paperwork and put it to rest?" For the first time since I had arrived in the county, Marie was silent. She had always controlled the conversation, always had a response ready, always knew how to steer public opinion in her favor. Now she was watching it slip away, and she didn't know how to stop it. Nathan called on Monday morning. "Richard Dawson has been making calls," he said, "trying to find out who's been talking to the press, who filed FOIA requests, and whether there's any way to delay the meeting. He's nervous. That means Marie is nervous." He paused. "They know something is coming. They just don't know what, and that uncertainty is eating them alive. People like them. People who've spent years controlling every variable they can't handle, not knowing. It makes them reactive. It makes them sloppy." I spent Monday night in a motel room 30 miles outside the county. The presentation materials sat on the desk, untouched. I didn't need to review them again. Every exhibit was numbered, sourced, and ready to enter the public record. The survey shows the mansion 247 feet inside my property line. The permit authorizing 400 square feet was issued when 8,000 had been built. The forged signature dated the same day. Hospital records showed my grandfather sedated after a cardiac episode. Marie's own email, Marie's own video, Marie's own words admit a timeline that made her story impossible. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. In less than 24 hours, everything would become irreversible. The evidence would enter the public record. The accusations would be spoken aloud in front of cameras and witnesses. There would be no quiet settlement, no private negotiation, no way for anyone to pretend this hadn't happened. Marie had spent years building her reputation in this county, the fundraisers, the donations, the relationships cultivated over decades. Tomorrow, all of it would be weighed against documentation she couldn't explain away. I thought about what Nathan had said earlier that week. When we move once. This was it, the moment my grandfather had prepared me for, without ever knowing exactly when it would come. He had kept the documents. He had written the warnings. He had trusted that someone would be paying attention when the truth finally mattered. I wondered if he had ever imagined it would end this way, his grandson standing in a government building, armed with nothing but paper and patience, facing down a woman who thought she could take whatever she wanted. The pressure of waiting was the hardest part. Not fear, I had moved past fear weeks ago. No doubt the evidence was airtight, just the strange, heavy stillness of standing at the edge of something that couldn't be undone. Marie would walk into that commission meeting tomorrow, believing she could talk her way out of anything. She would smile at the commissioners, invoke her history in the community, and present herself as a victim of outside aggression. And she would have no idea that every word she spoke was being recorded, that every claim she made would be answered with documents she had never expected anyone to find. I set my alarm for 6 in the morning and closed my eyes. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Somewhere out there, Marie Hargrove was probably rehearsing her speech, choosing her outfit, preparing to perform the role she had played for years, the gracious community pillar, wrongly accused. She had no way of knowing that the performance was already over. The evidence existed. The timeline was locked. The momentum was irreversible. Tomorrow, I would walk into a room full of people who had been told I was a threat to their community. I would stand calmly in front of the cameras and let the documents speak for themselves. No accusations, no anger, just facts entered into the public record, one after another, until there was nothing left for Marie Hargrove to hide behind. She had built her dream home on stolen land and never once considered that someone might come to take it back. Tomorrow, she would learn what happened when confidence became carelessness, when a woman so certain of her own untouchability stopped being careful and handed her enemies everything they needed to destroy her. The alarm was set. The evidence was ready. All that remained was the morning. The county commission chamber was standing room only. A television camera from the regional news station sat mounted near the front, its red light already glowing. Whatever happened tonight would become a permanent public record. Marie Hargrove sat in the front row with her attorney, a real one this time, wearing a cream-colored blazer and pearl earrings. She smiled at the commissioners as they took their seats, nodded at familiar faces, and played her role with the ease of someone who had spent decades perfecting it. 3 seats behind her, Richard Dawson watched with studied calm, his hands folded, his expression revealing nothing. The commission chair called the meeting to order. Routine business occupied the first 40 minutes. The crowd grew restless, everyone knew why they were really here. Then the chair announced the agenda item that had packed the room, land use review and public comment period. Marie raised her hand before he finished speaking. She walked to the podium like she owned the building it sat in. Every step communicated absolute confidence. Every gesture signaled that this was merely a formality before her inevitable vindication. "Thank you, Commissioner," she began. "I'm here tonight to address the malicious harassment I've been subjected to by an individual making false claims about my property. For 5 years, I have lived peacefully in a home I purchased legally and built with proper permits. Now, an outsider with no connection to this community has launched a campaign of lies designed to steal what is rightfully mine." She glanced back at me, her eyes holding the kind of contempt reserved for insects. "I have documentation proving my ownership. I have permits approved by this county's planning department. I've contributed to this community for 3 decades. I'm asking this commission to take action against the defamation I've endured and protect longtime residents from outside agitators." She spoke for another 6 minutes, character witnesses, testimonials from neighbors, references to her ex-husband's legacy of public service. She caught herself on that one, glancing at Richard, who was very much alive, but recovered smoothly. The Herald reporter made a note. Marie concluded by requesting a formal statement condemning the accusations and returned to her seat with the satisfied air of someone who had already won. The chair asked if anyone else wished to speak. I raised my hand. Walking to the podium felt like crossing a battlefield in slow motion. I could feel Marie's eyes on my back, sense the hostility from faces I didn't recognize. These were her people, her community. But evidence doesn't care about territory. "My name is Jose Phillips," I said, keeping my voice level. "Harold Phillips was my grandfather. He owned 900 acres on this lake for over 50 years and never sold a single acre to anyone. I have documentation proving that the deed Mrs. Hargrove claims to possess is a forgery. I'd like to submit these exhibits to the public record. I moved through the evidence without pause, letting each fact build on the one before. Certified survey. The mansion sits 247 feet inside my property line. Permit comparison. The construction permit authorized 400 square feet, but the structure is 8,000, 20 times the approved size. Forensic analysis. A certified examiner concluded the signature on Marie's deed was forged, traced from another document. Medical records. My grandfather was hospitalized throughout 2019, including the date the deed was supposedly signed. FOIA obtained email. Mrs. Hargrove instructed a county planning officer to push it through quickly and promised to handle Richard if questions arose. I presented each exhibit on the projection screen, letting the documents fill the silence. Finally, I said, I'd like to enter into the record a video Mrs. Hargrove posted publicly 5 days ago. The clip played her tour of the mansion, the camera passing over a wall where the frame permit hung. I paused on the description. 400 square feet, I read aloud. The home she's standing in is 8,000. Mrs. Hargrove framed evidence of permit fraud and displayed it in her own hallway. I closed the folder. I'm not asking this commission to take my word. I'm asking you to look at the documents. I stepped away from the podium. The silence was absolute. No whispers, no movement. The silence held for 3 long seconds. Then Marie shattered it. This is ridiculous. She was on her feet, pushing past her attorney. That permit is exactly what we applied for. Everyone knows how things work around here. You have to know the right people to get things done. Her attorney grabbed her arm. She shook him off. I've lived in this county for 30 years. I've given more to this community than he ever will. And the commission chair tried to intervene. Mrs. Hargrove, please. But Marie was beyond hearing. No. She pointed directly at me, her composure crumbling in real time. That old man was supposed to sell me that land. He promised. Richard told me it was handled. The room went completely still. Someone in the crowd inhaled sharply. Richard Dawson's face drained of color. Marie seemed to realize what she had just said. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her attorney stepped in front of her, whispering urgently. But the words were already recorded, already transcribed, already part of the permanent public record that could never be erased. The commission chair's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Mrs. Hargrove, are you stating that you were aware the permit did not match the actual construction? Her attorney answered quickly. My client will not be making further statements. The chair continued. And are you stating the former county commissioner had direct involvement in this transaction? The attorney's voice was strained. My client declines to answer. The chair looked at the news camera, then at me. This commission will forward tonight's statements and all documentation to the district attorney's office for immediate review. We will request an independent audit of all permits issued between 2018 and 2021. We are also referring permit irregularities to the Texas State Attorney General's office. He looked directly at Marie. Mrs. Hargrove, I strongly suggest you retain criminal defense counsel. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Residents argued among themselves. Richard Dawson slipped out a side door without speaking to anyone. Marie stood frozen near the front row, her attorney gripping her elbow and whispering instructions she clearly wasn't processing. The woman who had walked into this chamber, believing she was untouchable, now looked like someone watching her world collapse one brick at a time. As she turned to leave, she passed within 3 feet of me and stopped. Her eyes met mine, and the mask slipped completely. The charm was gone. The confidence was gone. You think you've won, she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. That land should have been mine. Your grandfather promised it to me years ago. He owed my family. He owed us. I didn't respond. A dozen witnesses had heard every word. The news camera had captured her face, and somewhere in the crowd, the Herald reporter was already writing the headline. 6 weeks after the commission meeting, the district attorney filed charges. Marie Hargrove pleaded no contest to forgery, filing false documents, and fraud, all felonies. The judge sentenced her to 5 years probation, a $50,000 fine, and 200 hours of community service. She would not serve prison time, but her name would appear in criminal databases for the rest of her life. The woman who had walked into that commission chamber believing her connections made her untouchable now had to explain to every future employer, every new neighbor, Every background check why she had a felony conviction on her record. Richard Dawson's reckoning followed. The state attorney general's office opened an investigation into his years as county commissioner. Internal emails surfaced showing he had pressured staff to expedite permits for allies. 3 other property owners came forward with similar stories. Dawson resigned from every board and civic organization. Last I heard, he had retained criminal defense counsel and was cooperating with investigators in exchange for consideration on potential charges. Diane Mercer, the planning officer, was terminated and referred to the state licensing board. 2 other employees were fired. The county implemented new permit procedures requiring multiple sign-offs. An external auditor flagged 14 additional cases for investigation. The civil case concluded 4 months later. The judge ruled unambiguously in my favor. Marie was ordered to either purchase the encroached land at fair market value, plus a 30% penalty, approximately $1.2 million, or demolish all structures within 180 days. She chose demolition. Her money had been drained by legal fees in the criminal case. She couldn't afford to buy what she had tried to steal. I was awarded $150,000 in damages for legal expenses, property damage, and harassment. Her attorney requested a payment plan. The judge granted it. I didn't object. I gave Marie the full 180 days. I didn't push for expedited demolition. I didn't seek interviews or make public statements beyond the necessary. When the Herald called, I kept it simple. I just wanted what was rightfully left to me by my grandfather. My grandfather had taught me that land was a responsibility, not a weapon. He had held on to those 900 acres for 50 years, not to defeat anyone, but because he believed in taking care of what was his. Letting the consequences follow their natural course honored that legacy better than any act of vengeance ever could. The demolition happened in late spring. I didn't watch. A neighbor sent photos when it was done, the mansion reduced to rubble. The rubble hauled away by trucks that ran back and forth for 3 days. The land scraped clean and seeded with native grass. The swimming pool was filled in. The private dock was removed. By summer, you couldn't tell anything had ever been there. Just a gentle slope leading down to the lake, the way it had looked when my grandfather first bought the property in 1952. I drove out on a Saturday in October, almost exactly 1 year after that first commission meeting. The morning was cool and quiet, the kind of autumn day my grandfather used to call perfect fishing weather. The gate Marie had installed was gone. The security cameras were gone. The threatening signs were gone. I parked at the top of the hill and walked down to where the mansion had stood. The grass was coming in thick and green, fed by autumn rains. Wildflowers had taken root near the waterline, black-eyed Susans and Indian paintbrush, the same kinds that had grown here when I was a kid. The lake stretched out calm and silver under a pale sky. A heron stood motionless in the shallows, hunting. I had brought 2 things with me: the original survey from 1987, now framed, with my grandfather's handwritten annotations marking every boundary, and a brass marker I had ordered to replace the ones that had been discarded. I walked to the GPS coordinates Bradley Walker had documented the exact spot where my grandfather's original marker had stood before Marie's people ripped it out and threw it in a drainage ditch. I drove the new marker into the ground with a mallet, making sure it was set deep enough that no one would ever move it again. The brass caught the morning light. It would be here long after I was gone, in my truck. I opened an envelope I had found 3 weeks earlier. It had been tucked inside a box of old photographs. The estate lawyer finally shipped me items from my grandfather's house that had been in storage since his death. I had almost missed it, buried under faded snapshots of family reunions and fishing trips. The envelope was addressed to me in his handwriting, the letters shaky but deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dated August 2015, written more than 3 years before he died, when he was still strong enough to know what was coming, but not strong enough to stop it. Jose, if you're reading this, I'm gone. They've been circling for years, waiting for me to get weak. The Hargroves, the Dawsons, all of them. They think because I'm old and alone, they can take what's mine. They're wrong. I've kept every document, every survey, every deed. The truth is in the paperwork, and the paperwork doesn't lie. Don't let them scare you. Don't let them make you angry. Just find the evidence and let it speak. The land will be yours. Keep it safe. I'm proud of you already. Grandpa Harold. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The sun was climbing higher now. burning off the morning mist over the lake. Somewhere, Marie Hargrove was reporting to her probation officer. Richard Dawson was sitting across a table from federal investigators. And I was standing on 900 acres that had belonged to my family for over 70 years, land that someone had tried to steal through forgery and fraud, and the arrogance of believing that power meant immunity. I got in my truck and drove toward the old farmhouse where my grandfather had lived. The house needed work, the roof leaked, the porch was sagging, and the barn hadn't been painted in a decade. There were fences to repair, fields to clear, and a lifetime of deferred maintenance to address. But the bones were good. The foundation was solid. My grandfather had built it to last. I pulled up to the house and turned off the engine. The wind moved through the live oaks the way it always had. The screen door creaked on its hinges. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't building a case or gathering evidence or waiting for the right moment to strike. I was just home.